person that's seized with giving her legal advice, if she doesn't ensure that these charges are, that the disciplinary proceedings aren't instituted?
The accounting officer would have been, yes, accountable overall. She would have engaged with, or should have engaged with Chief of Police and HR to look at whether the charges, that process has taken place. Mine was on the issue of interest was on the DPP instructions, if there were criminal prosecutions, and then how we dealt with that in terms of going forward in other processes.
Okay, so now when there's a directive that there must be proceedings instituted, you withdraw yourself from that process. But when it was an internal investigation, you inserted yourself in the process.
When there's a regulatory body directive, that is a directive, unless we deciding to take that on a review process or something like that, then I would get involved in it. It's a directive to the EMP, to Chief of Police, served on the Executive Mayor and then to the City Manager's office. The issue of the internal processes is a specific directive from the City Manager to say that you will, to the extent that you need to bring the additional leg. It is not about any convenience or otherwise. It is about what I must do when it comes to the internal investigation and in terms of this. I also deal, I'll just deal with that issue there.
Okay, so why were you then involved in the response, the drafting of the response to the IPID memorandum?
The response on the drafting of the IPID, the draft of the IPID memorandum was to look at information specifically on the fraud and corruption and what were the definitions. Then I gave it to my divisional head to look at what were the definitions, where do we see in the IPID report, what can you ascertain to that? Because when we deal with that issue, then we could finalize in terms of DPP instructions, and then our legal processes could have carried on.
But the IPID report wasn't asking you for a response regarding the criminal process. It was asking for a report on the disciplinary process. If you look at page 103 of the report, it says, conclusion, IPID awaits a report relating to when the disciplinary actions were instituted and how the matter was finalized to enable the institution to comply with the provisions of Section 30C of the IPID Act. Had nothing to do with the criminal charges.
Chair, again, IPID was requesting a report from the Chief of Police, addressed a letter to him to say, give us a report on progress on that. Ours was only to look at the compliance in terms of the criminal charges. Hence, we started drafting our report to deal with the issue of the criminal charges. The issue of IPID's directive goes to the city city manager, to MAPIA, and to HR. So the progress report would have been coming from that side.
But Mr. Bahari, why are you responding on the criminal charges? It says to you that they want to report on the disciplinary actions, and then they say to you the docket is referred to DPP for decision. It doesn't need anything from you. You are not even the accused. If there is an accused, insofar as the DPP process is concerned, that's going to be Commissioner Mkwanazi, and he must get his own representation to deal with that. You're looking out for the interest of the city. The city is being asked to respond about a report on the disciplinary proceedings. You ignore that, but you want to address the criminal issues.
Chair, I did not, you say ignoring the report on the disciplinary charges. Again, that is streamlined through the Chief Office and the HR. I was not involved in that. In terms of the DPP instruction, it is important in terms of when it comes to us of only criminal charges that are being laid. That is, we would look at and then look at what other processes in the city would have to be invoked in terms of reports to the city. Hence, the engagement was after meeting with Okanye and the DPP instructions. We were waiting for that document to say what are the other processes that need to be invoked in terms of the process of finalizing on the IPID findings. That is where so I was not involved in the other process with the Chief of Police and with the HR.
Mr. Barry, this report contains only one instruction, and it is that you institute disciplinary proceedings. That's the only instruction there is.
Yes.
And then in page 103, it says a docket is referred to DPP for decision. That's it. The rest of it, it summarizes what their investigation has, it analyzes, that's what they use, the word they use, what the investigation has found. So you are not required by this report to do anything at all.
No.
In the line of what you've done. The municipality was called upon to conduct a disciplinary process against Mr. Mkhwanazi. You tell us in paragraph 181 of your statement what it is that the city manager instructed you to do. You don't claim that it came out of the report. You say the city manager said to you, you prepare a draft response acknowledging receipt of the report and addressing certain technical issues that IP did not clarify, including the status of matters referred to the Director of Public Prosecution for decision. That's one that your city manager said you should look at. The scope and confidentiality of the report. And 3, the distinction between preliminary investigative observations and findings capable of immediate implementation. So you've told us what it is that the city manager wanted you to look at and prepare a response. That has nothing to do with what is contained in this document. And so
Chair,
the question is, what relating to the instruction from IPID were you dealing with? Do you want answers from IPID about?